Welcome to CRE Power Hour, hosted by the dynamic duo of commercial real estate, Stephanie Gillison and myself, Lisa Marie Wand. With 4 decades of combined industry experience, we've built, we've scaled, and we've conquered the real estate world. And we're here every second and fourth Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific to bring you the top guests from the commercial real estate field. Get ready to uncover trends, proven strategies, and meet the movers and shakers of the business. So tune in for the insights, stay for the success stories. This is CRE Power Hour, and we're super excited to introduce Cassie Walsh today. She's an attorney with Woodburn and Wedge, and we're here to talk about all kinds of fun legal stuff today, right, Cassie?
Oh, yeah, legal stuff. Super fun.
Most people, when they hear attorney, they're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, everyone's hopping off right now. They're like, just kidding. I'll wait for the next one. No, it is exciting. Like, I find it fun. I think you guys are going to hear somewhat exciting stuff today.
Awesome.
We always have exciting stuff when it comes to attorneys. I love attorneys. They're
too.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, as long as I've been doing real estate, and same with you, Lisa Marie, we run into so many people with so much money who have absolutely no clue how to set up their stuff. It's shocking. Last week I had a closing and I told them when we went under contract, I said, look, you need to set up a separate LLC that buys this property. You don't need it in your personal name. They were like, really? I'm like, you're going to spend $5.6 million and you don't know that answer? So it's great that you're here today, because I think a lot of agents and brokers need to hear these stories, because you will run into people that have no experience, no matter how much money they have.
Yeah. And
go ahead, Cassie.
Yeah, I went to a law school for a reason, so that people don't have to think about the legal stuff. They can just hire someone who can do all those types of thinking for them.
How many times have you been in a commercial transaction, Stephanie, and halfway through the buyer decides to change the entity that they're purchasing the property in? It messes everything up. Like you said, they don't have everything together. So Cassie, we want to hear from you about what are some of the things that that our clients, commercial real estate investors, can do ahead of time to set themselves up for success?
Definitely. So first off, anything that you buy in your personal name, you're automatically subjecting yourself, possibly your spouse and your kids, to all types of liability. So we really need to separate that off. So you do need to get an entity, whether that is a corporation or an LLC. I'm in Nevada, and LLCs are extremely popular here. And the reason why is we just need to segregate that liability so that people are not getting themselves in trouble.
And how much? So I live in Nevada too. In fact, Cassie and I are neighbors. It just worked out. We're both in Reno, and yes, we do see LLCs here a lot. I have an LLC for property that I purchased. And what do you recommend for people buying property? Because there's lots of different types of entities. What's your recommendation, just based from your perspective?
An LLC is definitely what I would recommend. It's it's fairly simple to set up. There's many ways that you could kind of structure that, whether it's one member, a couple members, you could go in with some family members or some friends, anything like that. So unless you're getting into a huge membership structure, an LLC is typically what I would recommend.
Okay. That sounds good. What about probate? So I am managing a transaction right now where I'm representing the buyer and the seller. And the seller, this is the last piece of their probate case, this piece of commercial real estate, industrial real estate. And so we get to deal with probate a lot too. Talk to us about that process, and also how people can avoid some of the pitfalls of that.
Yeah, well, my number one recommendation is, if you're alive, then your goal should be to help your family avoid probate upon your death. So if you don't have an estate plan right now, it's the perfect time to have it. especially for your commercial real estate investors. If you have real property and it's not in a trust, you're going to go to probate and you're going to deal with the same exact situation that Lisa Marie is talking about. And when you are in probate, you're on the court's timeline. People are dealing with grief and death at the same time while having to go to court and manage all the affairs.
And we're having to wait for the court schedule. And right now in Washoe County, where I live, it's about 4 to 6 weeks to get on the schedule for the judge for probate court. So that could really mess things up if somebody's in a hurry.
If you're going to probate court, you can't be in a hurry. And actually 4 to 6 weeks compared to places in California that are on a 12 to 14 month schedule. So we're actually, I don't know if lucky is the right term or the right term to use, but it is a little quicker than other places.
You know, how long is it in your area?
And well, I was going to just say that, you know, it can be up to 4 months in my area, and I think in a lot of areas, but I have heard many markets where it's that 12 to 18 month period. And, you know, the thing that's important now is that, you know, interest rates are changing on the daily, right? They're going up, especially in the commercial industry. And so when you get a property sold, you know, before you even list it, you need to understand, okay, what are we going to be dealing with? Because that is something that could be totally game changing, price changing for that buyer. And so if you enter into a contract and then you got to start the probate period, how long is that buyer going to stay on the line if the interest rates keep going up and up and up? Because in commercial land, banks don't want to lock those in for a long period of time whatsoever. And so I think that's why it's so important. And we've talked about this with everything, title, you know, just knowing what it is that you're representing and making sure that you have a game plan. Cassie, let me ask you this. When an agent or a broker comes upon a property that, you know, the situation is somebody's died and they didn't have it in a trust, and you know that probate's going to have that ability, but the family doesn't, the heirs doesn't even know, well, what attorney do we use? Is that something that your firm does?
Absolutely. And, you know, typically, I always tell my clients, you know, when there is a probate happening or we're dealing with a trust, you didn't go to probate school, you didn't go to trustee school. And so you do need an attorney that's going to, you know, kind of be there and get the process going, because we are going to be waiting on the court's timeline. So there is a sense of urgency there.
Now, let's ask this question. Just, I know the answer, but I want to make sure that, one, I know it correctly, and two, that the audience gets to learn this if they don't. You know, we should put our properties in an LLC, more than likely, right? I know that all of mine are in LLCs or multiple different LLCs. At what point do we need to start that trust? And can that trust own those LLCs? Or tell us how that works.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm happy you brought that up. So with having an LLC, typically people are owning their membership interest as individuals. We want to assign that membership interest over to the trust. So we're never going to, you know, take that LLC and really put it into a trust per se, but we're going to take that individual's interest that they own, make sure that they're owning it as the trustee of their trust, so we can work on that probate avoidance.
So it sounds like, just to clarify for everybody watching live or later on, the LLC exists, and then you're a member of the LLC, one or more, and then you are also, that LLC is assigned to the trust, so you're a trustee also?
Yes, so you're kind of going to wear two hats at the same time. I use that analogy a lot. So when you're dealing with your trust, you're going to wear your trustee hat. When you're dealing with your LLC, you're going to wear your LLC hat, but you're going to own your LLC membership as a trustee of your trust. It's still going to be yours. You know, it doesn't really change anything, but the goal is to avoid probate. And we're going to make sure that that LLC or that trust is owning that LLC interest.
Perfect. So the deed is going to show the LLC as the owner.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then how does one, you know, let's talk about representation. How does an agent, a broker, know that the trust is a party to that LLC, or does that matter?
So they can always request, the LLC records, just see the ownership, because for me, if I'm going to assign an individual's ownership to their trust, I would also want to amend the operating agreement just to reflect the exhibit to show that a trust is involved. And really, so with having a trust involved, even when the individual who was the trustee passes away, the successor can step in. They can, conclude their business, maybe sell off their interest of the LLC. They can help deal with real property transfers. But I want to make someone aware that, we have a trust involved.
So the title company requests the documents for the entity. And so if there's an LLC, then there's an amendment to that for the trust.
Yep.
That's happening with the transaction I'm doing right now. So that, and that's the best way to avoid probate. And then there's financial ramifications to probate as well. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah. So and it's going to be different jurisdictional wise from state to state, but, a very simple probate. And by simple, I mean, we're just kind of dealing with a house, maybe a car, and a bank account. Minimum, you'll spend $8,000. Whereas a flat fee for a trust in Northern Nevada, you're looking at $4,000.
Yeah, so you can save some money there. And then there can be tax involved with probate sales as well. And then I also know you can be ready to purchase a property, go to probate court, and then what can happen?
An overbid.
Yeah, will you talk about that?
Yeah, so exactly what you were saying, Lisa Marie. So you can have this buyer ready to go, but it needs to be subject to court's approval. And someone else can walk in that day and they can overbid what the buyer wanted to buy the property for, and they can take it out from under you, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah.
Imagine being the real estate broker on that deal. You've secured the buyer, you secured the listing, you've secured your commission because that buyer's going to close and buy it. But then you go to probate, somebody walks in off the streets, outbids, you're out completely.
Yeah.
Wow. Very important to know what you're representing before you represent it, for sure. So we've talked about having the trust for probate. What other documents, or if anything, to make sure that they're all set and ready to go?
Yeah, so trust is always going to be the main vehicle of the estate plan to have that probate avoidance factor. But in addition, every person needs a will. So with my estate plans, I prepare a very simple pour over will saying everything I own, I want it to be a part of my trust. And that is for if we have an asset that's left outside of the trust, we can use that for a more simple form of probate. And within a will in the state of Nevada, that's where you can name like guardianship provisions for your minor children. And that's the only place that it can go. So you can make sure that your kids are taken care of if anything were to happen to you and your spouse. And then also we have our life documents, so the powers of attorney, and that can be for financial decisions and for healthcare decisions. Powers of attorney are only in effect during one's lifetime. So if someone doesn't have capacity, maybe even someone's going out of the country for a little bit and they want someone to handle their affairs, they're going to designate that in the documents.
Yeah. So what about if someone owns a property as an individual? Let's say they didn't put it in their LLC and then they want to set up a trust. Is that what you were talking about with the pour over will?
Yeah. So if someone owns a piece of property individually, but they have a trust and maybe they just kind of forgot to transfer it over, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
With that, then we're going to go to the court and be like, hey, judge, look, we have a trust. They just forgot to transfer it over. Can we just have a very simple set aside petition to put this asset into the trust?
Okay. So you don't necessarily change the deed per se. You just add a document.
Eventually you will change the deed. So then we would transfer it into the trust, but we'd have to make sure the court approves it first.
And sometimes financing can be an issue. If someone has a loan in their own name or in some other entity, then that could affect the trust as well, right?
Yeah, well, and especially with real property, like what Stephanie was saying with the interest rates, these mortgage companies, they're going to foreclose if they have the chance to do so. So while this property is kind of sitting in limbo, whether it's going through probate or we're trying to put it into the trust, I'm assuming people are going to want to foreclose a little sooner than maybe they did in years past.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then there's also the disposition of the property, because while probate is happening, there's still taxes, insurance, there's the upkeep of the property, there's everything else that goes along with that. And then, who's responsible for all that? I see family members disagreeing about stuff like this, while they're waiting for the courts to come to a decision.
Yeah, and being named like as an executor of a will or trustee of a trust, it's a lot of work. And if there isn't a liquid asset, like such as a bank account where you can kind of take those funds and pay for expense estates, it's coming out of your own pocket so you can get reimbursed and sell that property.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
What other, I think a lot of times people, and I'm one of them, I'm a 46-year-old and I'm one of them. I'll just admit it. But there's been so many times where everybody's like, it's time to sit down and set up your trust and this and this. And this is several years back. And I always said, oh, I'm too young to think about that. You should do it immediately.
Put it off.
As soon as you own something, it doesn't matter what your age is. As soon as you own something, you should literally have a trust, correct?
Yeah, in Nevada, if you own real property or you have over $20,000 in assets, that exceeds that probate threshold. So that's when you need a trust, which $20,000, like,
it's nothing.
No, and who's going to want to go and spend, maybe $4,000 on a trust? I'm kind of just giving like a ballpark price of the Northern Nevada like prices for trust, but it's a really, really low threshold. And I sit here and I talk with my clients all day, like, hey, you need an estate plan, but I myself, I'm like, I don't even know if I'm ready for that. And because it just doesn't, I don't know, it feels like you need to be like some big player with a bunch of money. And
that's exactly what I thought for the longest time. I'm like, I don't even have enough money to have. I mean, this is back in the day, but I'm thinking, what am I going to put in this trust? What am I going to put in my estate plan? I might have $6 this week, and next week I might have 6 million. I don't know. But I think a lot of people are, and so I guess that's the thing, when day one, when you own a piece of real estate, you've set up your trust and you keep continuing to buy real estate, right? I'm one of those people. I'm constantly investing into something and owning real estate. And so, you're just adding it to that trust, but it's not like you have to redo it every single time, right?
No, you don't. So the most important part about having a trust is what we call funding the trust, which is just a fancy term for we need to retitle those assets in the name of the trust. So for you, Stephanie, when you go and buy a new piece of property, just buy it in the name of the trust, or if you have an LLC, buy it in your LLC. Make sure that your LLC
has already been assigned to the trust. Exactly. So so it's not like, and I think that is a big misconception of folks is I'm working with a client right now on your all side of the world, and I'm in part with his estate planning, his financial advisors, his CPA. I, as the real estate broker, he's got about $80 million worth of real estate assets, and we're figuring out where everything goes. And I'm sitting there on that call going, this guy's got $80 million worth of real estate and doesn't even have any of this in place yet. I'm like blown away, but they exist.
Well, and it's also important. So when you have like your trust and your estate planning, you got to tell people within those documents who gets what. If not, then the statute gets to decide who gets what. So, you might want to give your sister like a property, or one of your friends, or, you want to give them some sort of money, but with the statute, it's going to go in a structured manner. So if you don't have anything in place, it's going to go to your kids or your spouse and everything. So everyone deserves their chance to tell people who gets what upon their death.
Well, and sometimes people have unique circumstances and maybe they don't want the structure that the court has. That's not the way that they want their assets allocated. You know, not everybody gets along with their family. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. Well, and then, so, you know, not everyone gets along with their family. Add in death and just see the craziness that happens within families, because people are a little crazy when people die. And when they see money out there that could be up for grabs, it's not a smooth and easy process, like, at all.
You know, and I do want to say that, because I had a very wealthy client that died way back 2006, never had anything in place. He owned at the time about $38 million worth of real estate. New wife, ex-wife, children, all fought, and they fought and they fought. There were 3 people that made money in that deal: me, attorneys,
The attorney,
and the bank that needed to, you know, re-get some of the money that was loaned out on those. That was it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a shame, but it was about a 6 to 7 year litigation process, and none of those people got anything, but they're the ones that started the fight. And if he had just done what he should have done, right?
Yeah.
It took me 6 years to make all that money, because we had to fight through it all. But I'm still the only one, you know, me and the attorneys won. So
yeah,
great.
and I tell people, I'm like, the only one who wins in probate is me, because my fees will be guaranteed to be paid. Your child, like, and it's true. It's set by statute. Like, attorneys will get paid. You know, the creditors will be paid. Anyone else who is hired will be paid. How much of the pie is going to be left for the beneficiaries?
That's right. That's right.
And then the situation that you brought up, Stephanie, where there's multiple spouses, you know, current and former spouses and kids and maybe stepkids and the whole thing. It reminds me of, do you remember Anna Nicole Smith? She married that very wealthy guy. And then she spent years fighting to try to get what she thought was rightfully hers from his estate. And then sometimes there's nothing left, right, Cassie, by the time the fight is over.
Yeah, and just like the emotion dealing with all of that. Like, you just lost someone, you're sad, you're going through all of that, and then now you get to fight with maybe a step parent, a sibling, like, all it's not going to be very fun compared to taking that burden off of your kids and your loved ones, planning it out. Not everyone is going to be happy all the time. And I do deal with clients where it's like the very cookie cutter family, you know, equally to the children, but that's not how everyone's estate is. They want to give back to their friends, or they want to donate to charity, and it doesn't matter if your family is unhappy with your wishes, but it's important that your wishes can be followed.
I think about, you see that in the movies a lot, where all the parties, the family members are sitting around so that they can read the paperwork, the will, all of that stuff. And it's in the movies, at least, it's a very dramatic kind of a situation. But I know,
come on, we've seen it in real life, and it's very dramatic.
Well, and death does not bring out the best in people, does it? When you're talking about people's castles and their money, their property, their assets, you know, some people lose their mind. And so it's all the more reason to get this paperwork taken care of. So if someone's starting out and they don't have any, they own property, they have in Nevada, $20,000 in a bank account. Where do you recommend they start? Let's just go over it again, because I think people think it's really complicated, and that's one of the reasons they wait. I just had a friend who was 37 that passed away. He was one of my closest friends. It happened last month. They owned a commercial building. I sold them. They owned houses. They owned property out of the country. They owned horses. They owned boats, all this stuff. And, you know, I'm not involved in what's going on behind the scenes, but I think because of their age, they may not have had everything together. So.
Well, and it can definitely be an age thing, like what Stephanie was saying, like, oh, I'm not old enough to have one yet. But Americans hate talking about their mortality. Other countries are really great about it. They're like, when I die, I want this to happen. Americans suck at it. They want to put it off into the near future, like that will never happen to me. But, that typical saying, the only thing that's guaranteed is death and taxes. We are all going to die. And then, your estate will probably be taxed too. But to start, just you want to find someone who you can have candid conversations with. You want to make sure that you're comfortable speaking to someone about your family dynamics, that you can trust them. You want to make sure that the relationship matches.
Yeah. And Cassie, a lot of people are setting up trust and, their estates and doing this planning to make sure that they're not taxed so heavily when they're passing everything on, and even while they're still living. So is that something that you all specialize into, or do you all bring in strategic partners to help with that?
Yeah, well, so right now, the federal estate tax exemption is $12.92 million. And if you have a couple, we're looking at $25 million. So in Nevada, we don't have state estate tax. So I'm just kind of looking at the federal level right now. So unless your estate is going to exceed that $25 million threshold, we don't really need to worry about estate tax at the moment. But that could change in 2026. So in 2026, it's supposed to sunset. And so it's predicted that the estate tax is going to dramatically increase, meaning that we just need to have a little bit more crafty estate planning done by the attorneys. But we do help with avoiding estate tax. If you've heard of like an A/B trust, essentially, we can avoid estate tax that way. I don't want to get too into the weeds on talking about that, but...
So when the code changes, is the trust documents written in such a way that it's in perpetuity if something changes, or let's say things change in 2026, do people have to update their trust?
Ahead of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the answer to that, not because I've done it, I need to, but my parents just did it. In the event in 2026 it changes, it's already written to push that right through. And so you've got to pre-plan. You can't be in 2026 and do it backwards. Doesn't work that way, right, Cassie?
Yeah, well, and if you of course in 2026 and beyond, if you come in and let's say the estate tax decreases, so 5 million per person, so 10 million for a couple, and you're looking at $12 million, we'll fix the estate plan. We'll make sure that we can have some sort of irrevocability in it so we can avoid that tax. But I think I'm going to be very busy at the end of 2025 just when we hear about the state tax exemption sunsetting.
So what do you like most about what you do as far as helping people with their entities and structures for their family, for their assets?
Yeah, I like meeting with people and just getting to know them, getting to learn a little bit about their family. I think that's fun, just being able to meet the different people. And I feel like I can kind of be creative each day. Like they tell me what they want upon their death, and I can make that into what they want on paper. So I find that fun. I feel like I've definitely become a little insensitized when I talk about death, because it's what I talk about all day and everything. Yeah. So I have a lot of fun at my job. There's something new every day, so I do enjoy it.
It's like it's kind of like a magical thing in a way, because you're helping people create something that's totally in the future that you can't even necessarily imagine yet, but you're helping them put the documents together to make their wishes come true.
Yeah, that's how it feels. And usually when people come see me, they're happy to see me. When it comes to estate planning, they're voluntarily coming. Whereas, I don't know, you see it in the movies when someone gets arrested and everything. Like usually people aren't very happy to see attorneys. For the most part, people are happy to see me, which is a good thing.
That's great. Well, what else do you want to share with our audience today that you think is important as far as it relates to commercial real estate assets? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing I do want to mention is Do you guys ever experience, so I'm sure you're pushing on most of your clients that they need to purchase these properties in an entity. But do you ever see people come and purchase it like as a family? So as parents and they have their children involved?
I've seen that. Typically they'll just all be members, or it'll be a family limited partnership.
Yeah, so I think that's great when all the family members are involved in the LLC. You have this family limited partnership. I do want to caution people when they're buying property, just individually with their parents or with your children, just because of the huge liability that you're adding. The more people that you add, the more liability that you are facing. So if a parent were to buy a property with their child, okay, what if their child gets divorced? That property is going to be subject to it. If you're owning it individually, what if that child gets into a horrible car wreck and it's their fault? Now that liability is being faced. So it's all about just separating that liability. And no, we can never protect for people's negligent acts or their willful misconduct. So if you do something willingly, an LLC can never protect from that. But we do want to just make sure that we are limiting our liability, protecting ourselves, protecting our family, planning for our death.
It's like putting up the walls of the fortress. I have a client I was talking to this morning, and she represents an entire family. So I think it was their grandparents or their great grandparents that bought some property that's worth a ton of money. And then that property was sold, and now they have all this money in this family trust to play with. And then I'm helping them purchase assets. So it's really interesting how decisions that were made generations ago are, helping people, directing where that money goes now. And you don't want to give it away if you don't have to, right?
Yeah, well, and right now too, with the baby boomer generation aging, we're going to see a huge transfer of wealth. I can't remember the statistic on the top of my head. I feel like it's $44 trillion of assets are going to be transferred down to the Gen X, or millennials, Gen Z generation. So it's like we're going to see that huge generational transfer that we haven't seen before in America.
Okay.
No wonder everything's getting more expensive.
Is that what it is? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Cassie, thank you so much for being on our show today.
Yeah.
It actually was very informative and very interesting. And you have a great personality. And I definitely want to stay connected with you since we're both in Reno, and maybe I can refer some people your way. And
oh yeah, and same with me to you. It was great meeting with both of you guys and just being able to chat for a little bit. I'm glad you found estate planning a lot more fun than it sounds. It sounds a little dry at first.
Hey, that's why people don't check into it. But I mean, seriously, when you've been in the business as long as Lisa Marie and I have, I mean, you run into this stuff all the time. And you know what? As a real estate broker agent, we need to be our clients' experts and resources. And that's why we bring on partners to help you all get educated and up to speed, because you will face this at some point in your career. So now you'll be prepared.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, all.